morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest.
Good morning, Slava.
Good morning, Jonathan.
How are you on this fine high storm day?
I am doing exceptionally well considering the high storm.
Exceptionally well. Hopefully you're a rider of storms. As you all know, we're back on Roshar today discussing interludes 5, 6, 7, and 8. So 4 interludes and then chapters 35 through 42, 43. We like 43, so we might just add it in. Originally, it was just going to be 42, 12 chapters today. But we might toss it in there. So 42 or 43. If you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a podcast. And we're reading Sanderson's Words of Radiance. Slava, over to you.
That we are. And I say we just dive into it. Most people who are here know who Sanderson is, know the book we're on. So, Riders of Storms. Interlude 5. As a high storm approaches the city of Narak, Thud reports to Eshonai that they have a meeting in 7 days with the Alethi, and that he didn't see either Dalinar or the Surgebinder when he arranged the meeting. Eshonai attunes resolve and brings her captive Spren to the high storm to transform. Eshonai stands in the storm with the shield braced against a rock to protect her from the winds, to face the Stormfather head-on rather than sheltering in the rocks. The wind blows her shield away, leaving her exposed, though she's able to hold on to some rocks from being blown away. The eye of the storm reaches her, and the Stormfather asks if this is really what she wants. The red spren breaks free from its crystal and shoots out red lightning. Eshonai has a bad premonition and says no and tries to elude the spren, but it hits her in the chest, shooting out red tendrils. The Stormfather says that this was inevitable. He cannot protect Eshonai, and he is sorry. And Eshonai begins to transform into war form.
So when you were reading this about this red spren being set free, or did you have any initial thoughts on that? And then I've got a question about the Stormfather.
I had some questions about it, because the spren is encapsulated in something. It's not free-flowing like Syl or Pattern or the other spren that show up, like Pain spren, Shame spren. I really didn't give it too much thought, but a question popped in my head as I was reading it, listening to it. Why is the Persendes spren encapsulated, or this particular Persendes?
Mm-hmm.
But then I moved on. Are you telling me there's something special about it being in a capsule or it being somehow imprisoned?
Yeah, a couple things on that. I know for the readers, Slava's actually currently meeting Yeah, a couple things on that. Slava's actually currently meeting. Did you give me alcohol this morning?
I didn't.
I believe that you might have.
Your wife probably poisoned you.
Yes.
Have you been feeling weaker and weaker?
On our 1-year anniversary, no less. Huh. Joke's on her. We don't have life insurance. It's just out of sheer spite.
Right.
For the readers, nope. For the listeners, Slava is currently reading Mistborn, and to answer your question about trapped spren, some of Mistborn's magic system translates over to Roshar, and I'll just leave it at that. Slava actually hates Mistborn right now. Let's just call it what it is. He's been complaining to Spencer and I about that.
It's a mild hate.
And it's not, it's not the level of hate that I have for City in the City. I actually don't even think it's hate. I think you're just bored.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
It's just boredom.
I'm not in tune, pun intended, with the characters as I am with the Stormlight characters, even though, and we discussed this before the recording started, even though I understand where they're going, I understand their wants and needs, motivations, some of the complaints you've had about other books who showed this poorly, Sanderson's early writing, this is Mistborn, his second published book. I'm not faulting him for any of his lack of writing chops, because he has chops even here. So this is early in his writing. I'm not faulting him for this being an early book. That's not what's making me bored. To the point, again, I understand where the characters are going. It's an interesting story. It's an interesting magic system, but something about it, I'm not enthralled with the story.
Not vibing.
As much as I am with Stormlight Archives, as much as I was with the short story that we read, and Warbreaker. So for some reason, don't hate me, audience, I'm just not vibing.
Not vibing. Anyway, that's all I'll mention in terms of like this specific trap spren doesn't have anything to do with Mistborn, but some trap spren do.
Why are they trapped?
Why are they trapped?
Yeah, why would Eshonai trap this spren?
She didn't.
So she was given a trapped spren.
I believe so. I might be misremembering. But anyway, I think your better question is, why did she let it out? And then the answer we get is like, well, she wanted to bring back the old gods. And this is the point that I was going to make, is the council at Narak of the Parshendi said, we don't want to bring back the old forms because it also brings back our old gods.
Right, that's why they killed Gavilar. And now they're bringing them back anyway.
Right. That brings us to the question of like, is that the real reason they killed Gavilar?
That's the reason they gave.
That is the reason they
And
gave.
if you read the prelude to Oathbringer, that's the reason they give Yasna. And the internal dialogue that we have with the Parshendi that's talking to Gavilar, that's the reason she has in her head that this can't happen.
Right.
Now, there might be more to it, but that is part of the reason. Whether it's only a sliver of the reason, it's not a lie.
Yeah. Well, and then, you've got Sun Tzu's the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So they, say, we don't want this to come back. They kill Gavilar. It incites this entire story. And now they're to the point where the humans are just offing them in a full-on, Holocaust, basically. And not exactly. It's more of a genocide. But anyway.
Potato.
Yeah. And so now they're backed against a wall in terms of Eshonai's opinion, where they break open this spren who promises to bring them Warform. So that's one thing. The other thing that I was going to mention is Stormfather. What's your take on this character, the Stormfather? He says what's happening is inevitable. We also know the Stormfather's talking to Dalinar, giving him visions. Like, where's Slava's mind at in terms of, like, who is the Stormfather? What's he doing? What does the Stormfather want? Is he for the humans? Is he against the Parshendi? Is he neutral? Is he got his own goals?
Well, he definitely has his own goals. Who's the Stormfather? We haven't even talked about, and I haven't even thought through that question. He's the Stormfather. He is a god. If there's a hierarchy to gods here, and given Sanderson's Mormon roots, there might be him pulling out some Mormon theology and applying it here in a very loose way. So he is in a hierarchy of gods. He's a god of this planet, at the very least, the way I see it. The questions that you asked that I thought about was, what does he want? And is he neutral? I don't think he's neutral. I think if neutrality is going to be brought into it, he is maybe indifferent, and he has a goal. That's the second part, or one of your questions. Out of the four, I think you just posited to me. So he does have goals, and I think he's indifferent to the Parshendi and the humans, as in he doesn't prefer one over the other. He has a goal and a set of ideals, for lack of a better term, and he wishes those ideals to be met. That's why he tells Syl that Kaladin's going to kill her. That's why he admonishes Kaladin, and then later relents and lets Syl reattach herself to Kaladin. And maybe that's why he's sorry here, because whatever the Parshendi are doing are in line with his goals. Not necessarily that he prefers the Parshendi, but whatever Eshonai is doing is in line, or she's doing, quote-unquote, the right thing. And what's going to happen, whether that's to her specifically or to the Parshendi in general or the whole planet because of what's going on here, I think he says sorry because that's not what he desires for these people this planet.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best way I can answer it based on everything I read so far, because I am distracted by Mistborn. I can't read Oathbringer.
You make it sound like I'm parenting you and you're a bad child that I put you in a corner. What a sad life you lead.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's that bad, but I don't want to make this episode about how much I'm bored by Mistborn. Sorry, Mistborn fans. It's taken me away from reading Oathbringer, which I was so excited. I got past the prologue. I stopped because our recording of Oathbringer is going to be pretty far into the future. So I'm like, well, I can put this off. And then you're like, well, you want to read more? Here, read this instead. And in the back of my mind, maybe this is the child. Maybe you're right about the child analogy, because I'm kind of like a kid going, I want to read Oathbringer, but I got to do this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's my ideas, my thoughts, questions, ponderings on Stormfather. You tell me, am I correct? Am I wrong? Am I somewhere in the middle?
We're going to continue to get to know the Stormfather over the course of these books. I was just wondering what your take was on him, because currently we're just kind of getting to know him. We see him on both sides of the fence, and something that I didn't think about the first time that I read this was he is conversing with everyone.
Yeah. Well, he's God.
Yes.
Or the God of this planet.
As far as we understand it, yeah. Who is he talking to that we're not aware of? Because, like, if he's talking to both the Parchendi and the humans, he could be talking to anyone. He could have been talking to Yasna. He could be talking to... Well, he's not talking to Kaladin because we have his point of view. He could be talking to Renarin. He could be talking to Rock. He could be talking to Sadius. Like, he could be talking to anybody.
He could
we don't know.
be. I don't think he is. He could be, but he does talk to Kaladin. He admonishes Kaladin for killing Syl.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Admonishes is probably too kind of a word. I would say he scolds. Not even scolds isn't hard enough. Anyway, yes, he does talk to him. That was a bad. Anyway, you get what I mean.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
Moving forward, Interlude 6, we are on Xyle, a favorite old new character, right? Xyle wakes up suddenly as his life sense alerts him to someone approaching. He opens the door, feeling the aftermath of the high storm as Kaladin is about to knock. And Xyle comments on how bad Kaladin looks, which is, Kaladin's favorite compliment. That and you look depressed.
Yep.
You feel depressed. You are depressed. And Kaladin explains that Kaladin explains that he just stopped an assassination attempt with Elhokar a couple hours previously. Kaladin asks if Xyle's offer to train him is still open. And Xyle says no. And Kaladin's kind of like, oh, all right then. I'll figure it out myself. And Xyle realizes that Kaladin, being the young, I think he's 19 currently, which he feels older, right? Like, that's the depression talking. And Xyle's like, there's two men who live in this room when he realizes Kaladin doesn't get it and doesn't want to give a clear answer. There's the grumpy old man that is woken up at the middle of the night. He doesn't like you. He doesn't like anyone. Go away. And then there's the somewhat malleable and compassionate, but curmudgeon-y. I wish Sanderson wrote it so much better, but I'm giving the overview, right? He, who has a soft spot for grumpy bridgeman or whatever he says. And Kaladin goes, okay, I'll come back in the morning or whatever he says.
Well, let's read the quote. I'll bring up the Kindle book and we'll read the quote. Well, do you love books, audience? Do you love this podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so you never miss an episode.
Anyway, Xyle, for those who haven't put it together, is actually Vasher from Warbreaker. And the reason we know this is because he uses analogies from, oh my gosh, what's the name of the planet? It's not Threnody. It's not Scadrial. It's not Cell. Nalthis. Man, I'm getting rusty here. Nalthis. The world of the Court of Gods, looked over by the Shard endowment.
So Xyle, Vasher, here's what he says. Kid, Xyle said, turning his back towards him. 2 people live in this room. The boy frowned, looking at the single cot. First, Xyle said, is a grouchy swordsman who has a soft spot for kids who are in over their heads. He comes out by day. The other is a very, very grouchy swordsman who finds everything and everyone utterly contemptible. He comes out when some fool wakes him at a horrid hour of the night. I suggest you ask the first man and not the second. All right?
Oh, Xyle.
Yeah.
What a guy.
Oh, yeah.
And so Kaladin leaves, finally picking up a mentor for however long this will last in Kaladin's morose existence.
His ever morose existence.
Yes. Next up, we have Interlude 7 about Taln. And for those who know, Taln never broke. Do you know what that means, Slava?
Yeah. He never broke.
All right, great. So in this interlude, Borden speaks with Elhokar and Dalinar of his journey with wit to transport the seemingly madman to the Shattered Plains. As the madman listens on and thinks of various torments that he's undergone, the madman identifies himself as Telenenel Elin, Herald of War, and speaks of the desolations wiping out past knowledge and of other heralds helping to prepare the world for the time of the returns and the desolations, though his audience can barely understand him since he is speaking inaudibly with a northern Alethi accent. Borden says the madman just dropped his shard blade and that his eyes were always dark. Borden suggests sending the madman to the Ardents to take care of him. The madman comments that the coming days will be difficult, but humanity will survive and that he must be brought to their leaders. Dalinar says that he has a use for the shard blade and Borden's assistance as well. The madman comments that he thinks he is too late this time and asks himself how long it had been. You think this guy's really a herald?
Sure, why not? The real question is why he never broke. And what broke means. Because you asked me, and, well, I know what the actual statement...
You know the sentence, right, yeah. But not in terms of Stormlight Archive.
Right. So he's being interrogated, he's being tortured, he never breaks.
Yep.
What that means, I wish I knew if I could read the rest of the Stormlight Archives.
Salty much? Anyway, so, all right, so let's pause for a second. Do you know who the Heralds are?
Well, yeah, we meet him in the first part of Stormlight Archives. We meet him in the Way of Kings in the prelude. They're described as these heralds who are protectors. Desolation comes, they protect the people during the desolation, and they all abandon their oaths.
Except for Taln. Taln never broke.
He never broke, yep.
He never broke his oath. That's what that means. So the heralds made what's called the Oath Pact to prevent the Voidbringers from returning. Part of that includes them going to Braze, which is like the equivalent of Hell on Roshar, like the place Hell, and holding back the beings there, the Voidbringers, from coming back to destroy humanity with the Desolations, which is why it's called the Return and the Desolations. So, if this guy's a herald, which you believe he is, Taln never broke. He never broke the Oath Pact. So, part of this larger story is understanding, is this guy really a herald? What was the Oath Pact for? What was it doing? And this is like part of the overarching story that's going on. Another thing, as a reminder for the audience, is at the end of Way of Kings, we see this madman show up to Wit at the end, and he's muttering to himself, and he drops his shard blade, and then the book ends, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Which is where this reference comes of, like, Borden works with Wit to transport him to the Shattered Plains. And, yeah, he may be a herald, he may not.
Well, why wouldn't he be a herald?
Because he's a madman.
Doesn't mean anything. If Talon is the one who didn't break, and the other heralds broke, and he's a herald, there wouldn't be a mention about him not breaking. He's just a random madman.
That's my color commentary about Talon, the real Talon, whoever he is. The real Talon didn't break.
So this is an
This
imposter.
This man is mad. So that's for...
So he's not the real
you.
Talon. And Jasnah's dead.
Correct. Jasnah's dead.
All right. So he's not the real Talon then. If Jasnah's dead, then he's not the real Talon.
Okay. Don't play your little games with me.
Oh, okay. Anyway, moving on to Interlude 8, A Form of Power. We're back with Eshonai. She returns after the high storm to Narok to a large crowd curious about her transformation. Eshonai feels energetic as she sees tiny red lightning bolts when she flexes her fist, and has lost her bulky war form in favor of small ridges in her skin. She's able to leap a chasm by crouching and throwing herself in the air with less effort than war form required. Thud confronts her, saying her eyes are red, which is something referenced in the songs, but Eshonai cuts him off. Vanille approaches and is told that the storm form, that's what I meant when I said war form before, but the storm form,
I knew
that she can move in the high storm unimpeded, and that she can feel a storm building beyond the rhythms, a high storm that they can guide to use against their enemies. Eshonai addresses the crowd, saying that she saw the betrayal in the storm rider's eyes, and that he intends to help humans against the Prescendi. But they can now fight back using this new form, and the crowd hums awe and appreciation. Eshonai glories in the praise, but a voice inside her screams in horror.
What do you think that voice is?
Before we get to that, I really want to talk about the way Prescendi speak in song and rhythm.
Yeah.
I thought that is fantastic. That's a very unique way of, well, it's a unique way, but it's a unique ability that Brandison gives to the Prescendi. A unique cultural ability, a unique, personal ability. It's a whole thing where they don't speak like normal, quote unquote, people. They speak in a cadence, and they sing, and their songs tell stories rather than, tomes of books. So I thought that was just a cool thing that's not standard in a lot of books.
Yeah, it does something that people applaud Tolkien for doing, which is, creating multiple languages for his world without having to go through the work. And this is not a slight against Sanderson at all. It's, actually kind of genius, giving them a language without having to spell out, these are how nouns work, this is how sentence structure work, right? Like, it's just built in and believable because we've all heard music before.
Yeah. And we've seen cultures here on Earth that use song to tell stories. I mean, every song is a story, but not every culture incorporates song so deeply into their cultural expressions as others, right?
Right.
And here, Prescendi are those others.
Quick verbal side quest, not an actual side quest, although we should take one of those here in a second. So I'll leave that on you while I banter about my evening last night. We just watched A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan biopic, and I commented to my wife. I was like, and so it's a quick thing for the audience. Slava and I used to know a guy who, big Dylan fan, was a fatherish, mentorish figure in our community that we were in, living in the big city, went to a bunch of his concerts, followed along as Dylan went through the Jesus People movement a little bit, the controversies that came up, the politicizing of him, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, we're watching this movie, and I comment to my wife, I'm like, they don't make music the way that they used to. And she's like, you are not 80 years old. Calm down. I was like, no, they don't. There's something just simple and fun about Dylan's poetry set to music, right?
Yeah.
And the moments that are covered in the biopic are, there's one particular moment at the end of the movie where he's at the Newport Folk Festival where he just kind of erupts and breaks their tradition. These key moments just don't happen anymore in society, really, because, well, this is my color commentary on that. These things don't happen anymore because we are on a star-based system instead of bands. Now, Dylan wasn't a band, but wasn't like a band. He was an entity, like a star. But we just like with the internet and everyone getting too much information too quickly, there's no way to create key events like this anymore outside of the, let's call it the rioting and stuff that we've seen in the last couple of years, at least here in America, and then big things on the news, where it's like it's all protests and war and things like that. The music doesn't necessarily represent the culture anymore the way that it used to, I guess is the simple version. So anyway, that's my little color commentary on music and culture.
Before we get in that side quest, let's quickly answer your question. You said, what is the voice inside her? Or who is the voice inside Eshonai that is screaming in horror? Could it be her spren?
Could be.
They have melded together and the spren doesn't understand what's going on, or maybe understands too much, understands enough, and is screaming in horror. It's a new prison for the spren.
Could be.
Okay. So, side quest. Jonathan, if you could stand in the high storm and unlock a storm form style power, knowing that it might change something fundamental about your personality and or body, would you do it? And what would your new powers and side effects be?
I would 100% do that. And with something with the name of Stormform, I would assume that I can shoot lightning out. I would assume that it comes with maybe the ability to control the elements of sorts, or at least elements that are related to storms. Maybe I can put clouds above people's heads and have it rain on them. Simply for sheer enjoyment, I would do that. If someone starts brooding, I'll just like put a little cloud above their head and go, "Oh, what's going on, guys? It must," and then make it seem like that one person has a power instead of me.
Interesting.
And then of course I'd probably not know how to use it correctly and might accidentally kill them because of the lightning that strikes them. But we'll deal with that when the time comes. What about you?
Oh, 100% walking in that storm, no hesitation. And my power would be narrative manipulation or song manipulation. I can literally rewrite what's happening around me like I'm editing a book, like Doctor Strange. So Jonathan is mid-monologue about blah, blah, blah. Mr. Bourne is the greatest book in the world. Boom. Cuts to one of our, calls to actions.
Okay, that's not what I said.
Deleted.
I didn't say it was the greatest book in the
Snap
world.
my fingers, and suddenly I'm the main character.
All right, he's just not listening to me at the moment. Thanks for joining us today, audience, on today's side quest, where Slava ignores everything I have to say when it doesn't agree with his point of view, which is basically just like every other episode.
Touché.
Be sure to drop us a rating and help us spread the word if you're enjoying today's side quest.
And that brings us to part 3, Deadly, which starts off with chapter 35, The Multiplied Strain of Simultaneous Infusion. You want to take it away?
Yes. Quite the title of the chapter. Just one more, this is how my brain works. We watched another trailer when deciding on a movie last night for the biopic about Freddie Mercury, which I can't remember Bohemian Rhapsody, that was what it's called. And so when you were mentioning The Rock, I was thinking, do ch, we will rock you. Anyway, welcome to my brain, folks. I enjoyed that. You Slava staring at me like I've drunk a full bottle of whiskey, but cool story, bro. Great. Don't say anything. Literally no response. This is a really awesome episode.
That's funny.
Jackwagon. Chapter 35, Adolin paces around about on the plateau wearing shardplate. Dwelling on the assassination that took place the evening before, Adolin tries practicing his shardblade throws, but loses focus since he didn't get much sleep because he was guarding his father's quarters last night, thinking that Szeth might come back. Adolin thinks that his 3 Bridgeman guards are useless, classic Light Eyes, but reflects that Kaladin was unusually effective in his protecting of Dalinar, though he also is very unlikable and strange.
That's fair.
Also very Light Eyes to say, not just Light Eyes, but specifically about Kaladin, because, Kaladin. And I'm excited for this to happen. I can't wait for, I think it's the next section, where Kaladin has a great one-liner that's coming up. And I know that this is a spoiler-heavy show, but I don't want to ruin it for the audience because I just want to savor the moment. Anyway, Adolin succeeds at throwing his shard blade and returns to the war camp with his bodyguards, who are useless, and notices a procession of soul casters that usually aren't seen during the daytime. Adolin converses with the main ardent soulcaster, Kadash, and learns that their services are in high demand and that they will have to increase their training and work shifts. Adolin watches as a group of soulcasters working behind a silk screen for concealment, use their fabrials in concert to create a strong windbreak. Adolin questions Kadash about the old Radiance, and Kadash answers committally at first until Adolin expresses that he needs information urgently due to the fact of the assassination had a Radiant-like abilities, and Kadash then agrees to do the research for Adolin. Navani is standing and observing as she has a platform in the engineering grounds and supervises an experiment used of fabrials. And this is going to give us more, Navani is going to give us a lot more information in book 4 about fabrials and her discoveries of them. But one of the fun things that happens in these books is Sanderson shows us how the technology is improving over time and also doesn't just give us like, this is how it works. He lets the characters fiddle with it and finagle it and try and figure out how it works, which adds to the realism, right? After extensive preparations, the careful implementation, and their attempt to cause a round wooden parapet to float in the air without support succeeds. Adolin joins Navani and they talk in private. And Navani explains in technical terms, and this is how Sanderson reveals these things to us, because he allows someone to explain something for us without being full exposition, because usually the other character who's listening, i.e. the audience, interrupts and goes, I don't care about that, but he has revealed something in those moments to us, albeit in quick quips, and then he usually shows us the thing as well.
It's not clunky exposition or
Right.
just an exposition dump where you have 2 pages of
Let me pause the story. Right, exactly. Yeah, let me pause the story and tell you exactly how this magic system was built in my mind, which as younger writers, and I don't mind wearing this hat, I've done, because you're like, oh, you're so excited about the magic system, you want to tell him all about it. But that removes the ability to have tension.
Yeah.
Which is where Sanderson comes up with his 3 laws, which I believe we spoke about in Warbreaker during the guest episode.
We certainly did.
Yeah. And like one of his things is the audience is, and I'm going to just paraphrase this thing, the audience gets enjoyment based on the level of understanding of the magic system that they have, which then helps the characters get out of said problems, right? So anyway, I kind of slaughtered that, but Adolin, looking at the thing that Navani created, talks about the military application, and Navani's like, well, there's actually more practical applications for it. Then Adolin confronts his aunt, Navani, about her relationship with his father and the awkward position that his father's in regarding, social customs and violating them. And he lectures her over the other high princes, and she scoffs at those traditions and tells Adolin that he is free of his betrothal for the time being due to Yasna's disappearance. And Adolin and Navani leave for a meeting with Dalinar and Elhokar. As we can see, Navani is in denial about her daughter's death.
Right. I'm sort of surprised, maybe I shouldn't be. Tell me if I shouldn't be. By little conservative diatribe here.
Why does that surprise you?
He doesn't seem like the type that would make such a big deal about it.
Adolin cares enough about so Dalinar's Adolin's father, right? He's been required to follow the codes for a while now. He's grown up with his uncle and his father being warlords, bloody warlords at that, and his mother's dead in a way that we don't know how. His father's all they have left, and Adolin has always wanted to impress his father by being a good soldier.
Okay.
And part of that is, following the ways of the societal norms and blah, blah, blah. But to your point, Adolin stands out, and we see when we first meet him in Way of Kings that he helps a dark-eyed whore, right?
Yeah.
Defends her against normal Light Eyes behavior from Sadius's army. So I understand your comment, but because it puts him in a weird position, he doesn't want to be in a weird position because it's not just his father, it's also him and his house. It makes a little more sense. Also, she's family, so I think he feels more comfortable calling her out. I guess I'll tell you 40%, you're right. Like, it is a little weird, but also he's in a weird predicament too.
Fair enough. To your point earlier, this chapter is just mostly exposition about this new thing that's happening. Not action heavy. So, moving on to chapter 36.
No, it's more reflective. Yeah, it's more reflective for both Adolin and Navani, and giving us those human moments, right? Where it's like, and in terms of like written storytelling, we have these interludes, and this is like the beginning of part 3. And so, like, just talking story for a second, in chapter 34, Blossoms and Cake, we see some tension, some rising tension with Shallan and with the fight that she had with Tin soldiers and Vatha and Gaz coming to help her. And so, like, we just had rising action. We pause for a minute with these interludes with Rider of the Storms and Zyle, Taln, and a Form of Power. And now we're coming back down. And so, like, we had some rising tension. We paused to get some, like, I guess I'll call it exposition through interludes. Boom, 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 boom. 4 interludes. And now we're, like, back into letting the reader kind of, like, take a breather by seeing the human side and get to know the characters on a personal level. So I don't know if you want to add any color commentary on that.
No, not really. To my point, we get some exposition about the Fabrials and what the Soulcasters are doing. And to your point, we do get what you just said.
All right. Anyway, carry on. Let's get into some more tension.
Let's do
here.
it. Chapter 36 is next. A New Woman.
Yes, you are.
Okay. Pattern. I wish I had walked through that storm earlier. Pattern opens a lock on one of Tin's trunks for Shallan, and she examines the contents, finding clothing and spheres among other useful items. Vatha reports to Shallan that they had burned all the bodies of Tin and her guards, and she says that she will deal with the skeletons to avoid uncomfortable questions. Makab sends a servant to retrieve a palanquin for Shallan, and then just goes on his way. As Shallan enters the war camp, accompanied by Vatha and his deserter guards and her slaves, she frets over her betrothal and plans to continue Yasna's research. She learns that Dalinar is in conference with Elokar and orders her palanquin to be brought to the meeting. As she travels to the palace, she draws a sketch of herself confidently confronting Dalinar. This is in the attempt to boost her own morale. At the palace, Shallan enters with Vatha and Gaz as attendants. They reach the conference room at the top of the palace, and Kaladin spots her and asks her if Adolin is betrothed to a horn-eater princess, and she replies she was trying to travel incognito. Kaladin has Gaz seized, and says that Shallan is an imposter, since Adolin's real betrothed is lost at sea with a very dead Yasna. Side-eye towards Jonathan. But Shallan gives...
Of course.
But Shallan gives a span-read printout to Kaladin to have Navani authenticate her claims. Shallan becomes upset at the lack of accommodation on Kaladin's part, and they have a heated argument. Kaladin stalks away angry, but Shallan feels that the disturbance will lead to the desired result of her receiving an audience with Dalinar. Gaz mentions that Kaladin was a slave in the lumber yards recently and is very dangerous. Kaladin enters the chamber with the paper and returns after a short time, and then summons Shallan to enter the meeting.
Dun, dun, dun.
What do you... I mean, you're a more seasoned reader than I, so I'm asking this question in a way that you probably would ask a first-time reader, but I still want to get your response to it in whatever way you want to answer this. How do you like this setup for what ultimately will become sort of a friendly relationship, if not more, with Kaladin and Shallan here?
How do I like this setup?
Yeah.
One of the reasons we have the trope of like enemies become friends, friends become lovers, right? and why there's this tension.
Why don't enemies ever become lovers?
They do in 50 Shades of Grey.
Never read it, but I'll take your word for it.
Neither have I. I've just heard through the zeitgeist.
You're just on the subreddit daily.
It's bi-daily. It's twice a
Anyway,
day.
sorry. Answer that question.
It feels real. Like, how many times have you had like a friction-filled time with a person that you end up
Boning.
Showing your shard blade to is actually the phrase here. But man, you took this on a weird turn. No, a friction with someone that you end up becoming friends with. I mean, that's kind of how our friendship started, where you gave me this absolutely stupid story about strawberries, and we became friends, and here we are, right? So I don't know. I like it. I think it feels authentic, right?
Right. That's what I want to say. That's the word I was going to use. And I asked that question because I want to make my own short comment on it. Is it feels authentic. The boot thing from the previous part, them now having a little bit of bitterness, tension with each other, Kaladin having his ideas about light eyes, Shallan being, a sarcastic little curmudgeon, which I love about her. She's not really a curmudgeon, but she's
Right.
very sarcastic and witty. I think it's authentic and believable. Like their little tension here, although it foreshadows them growing closer, it's not tropey or it's not cliche. It's a trope. Like, yeah, enemies become friends, all that good stuff. But it's not cliche.
Right.
It's not. That's it. It's not cliche. And I thought it was well done. I enjoy Kaladin getting a little bit of ribbing from Shallan because I always enjoy Kaladin getting some ribbon.
Yes, me too. And honestly, there was some real, like, as a first-time reader, there's some real question of like, yeah, Shallan's betrothed to Aelin, but Yasna's dead, and this Bridgman seems kind of, dark and moody and rabble-rousing. Like maybe, and we as the audience know that they're both Radiance, so like maybe they will get together.
Yeah, and even that tension later on when they become more friendly, you kind of get that sense, or you at least ponder it, right? Like you don't get the sense. That's not the right term. You're left pondering, will she break her betrothal to Adolin? Will it be broken because people think that Yasna's dead? Will she start having feelings for Kaladin because, and this is me interpreting the situation, because they both have difficult pasts and that will draw them close. They have a shared understanding of certain things. They're both Radiance, to your point. So the setup here led me to think about those things and really think about those things when they're both in the chasms later on, which we'll talk about when we get to it. But, man, Sanderson, I don't want to be just a fanboy for Sanderson, but when it's true, it's true. Like, Sanderson does an amazing job with this little chapter. It's not that long. And this little snippet of the chapter itself.
Yeah, he does. Do you think that Spren can fall in love with each other?
I don't see why not if they're advanced enough, because they return to some sort of state. How do I say this? They return to a state of de-evolvement. That sounds very like I'm being harsh, but they return to a state, and then when they come back, in Syl's case, she retains some of her memories. When they first attach to a human, when they return, quote unquote, from wherever they go, or attach themselves to a human, they're in a state that's not mature. They slowly gain knowledge and understanding, and that's the only word I can think of is maturity, just like pattern. Like Syl, at first when we meet her Way of Kings, she's a little silly, and then she turns into somebody who can have full-on conversations and a back and forth with Kaladin, and even teach Kaladin things. So if they're in that mature state, Slava's term for it, probably.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would because of their purpose. I don't know if that's even like a possibility in their head. But for our purposes, for our discussion, sure, they can, at least my view of it.
What do you think their purpose is? What is the purpose of Spren?
Okay, well, given my limited knowledge of...
Well, you just used the word purpose, right?
Well,
so
I'm answering the question. So given my limited knowledge, I would say their purpose is to... Well, let me back up. So there's different types of Spren that I've observed. There's a Spren that kind of come up in different situations, like when there's shame or fear or death. There's rot spren, all sorts of. Then there's the spren who are trapped, encapsulated, somehow imprisoned in objects, like we have the Prescendi. That's actually a third type of spren. And then the spren that attach themselves to people and slowly grow into something, mature into something that you can converse with even. They can help you. They can interact with the world. So the purpose of those spren is what I'll answer, because the other two I don't know. And it seems that the ones that are encapsulated or trapped are the same as the ones that attach themselves to people. So the purpose of those spren in my mind is to maybe be guides in some way, to be a bridge in between two worlds or two dimensions. Because I see the guiding principle with Syl, and then Pattern is somebody who's helping Shallan. He doesn't really teach her a lot of things necessarily. Not the same way, at least, as Syl teaches Kaladin. I'm belaboring, but the point is that they somehow bridge the gap between the two dimensions, and they're supposed to guide and assist the people they attach themselves to. Does that make sense?
Okay. It does. The reason I ask why you think spren exist is, based on the current part of the story, we don't really know. But to your point, we have like emotion spren that represent emotion. We have spren that are more intelligent. Later, we get, and I'm trying to remember which book this is. I want to say it's Oathbringer, where we get a better description from Xyle about the different types of spren and entities in the Cosmere, although we also get that in Warbreaker at the end, which we talked about briefly. Emotion spren that you brought up, I mentioned that there is cognitive spren, and then I mentioned that Xyle gives us a description of the types of investiture in the world, but he definitely gives it to us in Words of Radiance. He just revises it later. He classifies invested entities in Rhythm of War. That's the problem. Okay, so sorry, folks. That's way far ahead. I thought it was in Oathbringer. I'm not going to finish my thought here as much as I will revisit because we've covered Warbreaker. So in Warbreaker, Vasher gives us the details that Type 1 investiture is made sentient. Type 2 is organic sentient. At the end of Warbreaker, Vivina and Vasher discuss the classification system for invested entities, identifying 4 main types: sentient, organic, sentient, non-organic, non-sentient, organic, and non-sentient, non-organic, with Nightblood being the notable example of the latter. And so Type 1 invested organic sentient entities like the Returned. Type 2 invested organic non-sentient entities would be like the Lifeless. Type 3 invested non-organic non-sentient entities. This is like awakened objects and things. The ropes that are animated by Vasher. And then Type 4 would be invested non-organic sentient entities like Nightblood, who we've met before. And then supposedly Type 0s, which is just pure investiture with sentience, such as spren. That's what we know so far, because I don't want to get too far ahead, but Vasher Xyle does have to recategorize as he spends his time on Roshar, and Warbreaker happens before we see Xyle Vasher on Roshar. So all those things to say, our original question, because this is all like very convoluted, original question was, can spren fall in love? Why, not can spren fall in love? Original question was, why does spren exist? And this is kind of what we know so far. That's a lot of exposition on my part. I'm not as good at Sanderson as this, so let's just keep moving on at this point with chapter 37, which is a matter of perspective, which I will let you pick up because I've been yapping, as the kids say.
Yes, you have. But chapter 37, a matter of perspective. During the break, 2 hours after the meeting started, Adolin ponders on the lack of consensus and how to deal with the threat that Szeth poses to the kingdom, and how dangerous he is, even with the number of shard bearers that are available to protect Elhokar and Dalinar, based on the reports of Zet's other attacks. That's why he's thinking about all of this. This has him worried. Adolin drinks some wine and taunts Relis over his boasts about wanting to duel Seth to try to bait him into a duel. Adolin then directly challenges Relis, but Relis says that Adolin has to rise in the rankings according to protocol before he can fight him. Relis declines despite Adolin offering to wager 5 shards against 1. But Ellet accepts a duel for the same proceeds. Relis is upset that Ellet accepted the duel and tries to taunt Adolin to a violent comeback and a possible voiding of the duel agreement. Adolin, to his credit, restrains himself. Sadeas' turn to come into the story. He taunts Adolin more effectively, causing Adolin to come near to punching him before he is restrained by Amaram, who consoles him to ignore Sadeas. Adolin tells Amaram to abandon Sadeas for Dalinar, but he refuses and says that he's able to keep the kingdom from falling apart further by bridging the gap between Sadeas and Dalinar. Adolin's mind wanders as Amaram speaks about how Sadeas's and Dalinar's goals are the same, despite the different means they use. And he sees Shallan and is drawn to her immediately. Amaram comments on his flightiness and the need to settle down, and comments that the girl is probably from Yakaved, and Adolin realizes who she is and goes over to meet her, and speaks with Dalinar and Navani about Jasnah being lost at sea. See, Jonathan, it is lost at sea.
Well, that is an opinion on it.
The look on your face when you find out that Jasnah's not dead, priceless.
Indeedy. Yes, indeedy.
So you want to give us a little bit of a seasoned perspective on chapter 37? I have some thoughts, but I want you to start this one off.
So Adolin is trying to get duels with people and cajole them. They're not necessarily onto his plan, but they're also onto his plan, right? Like, it's not entirely clear to them what he's doing. They're kind of only clear that he wants to collect shard blades for his family, which is true. They're not aware of the bigger picture that he's working on, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's actually what I was going to point out, or my comment was going to point at, is this is where Adolin really takes this new job, we'll call it that, seriously. Dalinar has told him, hey, collect the shard blades, go duel, and we see him take that up seriously. We get a little bit more of Adolin's character and his makeup in this section too. To your point, when he defended the prostitute, his talk with Navani, his inner dialogue about Kaladin, then we're brought as the reader here. All this gives us more about Adolin, and he becomes more and more likable.
Yes.
To me.
What do you think about Amaram stepping in, trying to create some sort of, I don't know, peace is probably too strong of a word, but some connection between Sadeas and Adolin/Dalinar?
I think it's all a game. If we know who Amaram is, based on what I know about Amaram, let's put it that way, I think he's playing some sort of game. It's a chess move for him. I don't necessarily trust him. Now, one could argue that what he did with Kaladin was not who he really is. It's him falling, if you will, him misstepping heavily because of his lust for a shard blade. Maybe. I don't know. I don't believe that, but I see that as a possibility. Given those 2 points, I think it's machinations, political machinations.
Yeah, Amaram's just a jackwagon. You don't have to trust him.
Okay, good.
Well, he's a jackwagon. He's in Sadeas' camp. Kick him to the sides. Kick him to the curb.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that I hold the opinion that I do.
So I'd say that in terms of Adolin, he's doing it. doing these duels and winning these shards, and overall it'll be a big game changer for him. Although there may be some struggle across the way.
And we learn about that struggle in the next section, whether that's this episode or next. But we see some stumbling blocks, some barriers that he hits.
Yes, that's true. Chapter 38 is the Silent Storm, where Shallan offers her condolences on Yasna's death to Dalinar and Navani,
Yasna's loss, yes.
reflecting
We have lost Yasna for a bit.
she's dead, reflecting on her own grief because Yasna's dead. Dalinar thanks her. Shallan brought Yasna's belongings as best she could in her shipwrecked, resilience. Navani is having trouble with Yasna's death, understandably so, as a mother. Shallan has started noticing Adolin and has started feeling some attraction toward him. Shallan gives some detailed account on the attack on the Wind's Pleasure to help Navani understand, but Navani lashes back and berates Shallan for saying that she set the ship afire, despite Yasna's apparently already fatal wound. Dalinar defends Shallan, and Navani apologizes and leaves because she's just having trouble dealing with it. Shallan tells Dalinar an abbreviated version of her journey via the caravan across the Frostlands to the war camps, being rescued by deserters whom she pledged clemency and reward in their service. Dalinar promises the pardons from the king, and Shallan then brings up the betrothal with Adolin to join them, smiling, and Shallan and Adolin flirt awkwardly, and Adolin offers to maintain the betrothal, but Dalinar asks Adolin to get some wine so he can privately talk to Shallan. Understandably so, as a good father would, because he doesn't know this woman, and he doesn't know anything. Dalinar inquires about Shallan's family and her interest. She explains the situation per Yasna's coaching, as she described it to her, and Dalinar allows the betrothal to stand temporarily based on Yasna's implied endorsement of Shallan pending further developments, i.e. investigations, offers her the position as a clerk, but they're interrupted abruptly because the High Prince Sabariel is trying to get Dalinar back into the conference that he left. Shallan mentally notes the attendees of the meeting, realizing that there's 3 primary factions, with Elhokar and Dalinar opposing Sadeas, Ruthar and Aladar, and Hatham leading a group of mediators, if we can call it that, and then Sabariel is kind of just on the outside doing his own thing. In this meeting, Shallan's listening, trying to put together what's going on. The group wants to know what's happening in Yakaved and the assassination, but she mentions that she wasn't there because she was busy becoming Yasna's ward. And on some personal business, they don't believe her. They think it's just a game because that's all that they know is playing games. Shallan says that she's visiting a distant relative, which is Sabariel, and he plays along because he wants to see where this is going to go. Afterwards, she speaks privately with Sabariel, saying that their arrangement will be mutually beneficial, and Dalinar disrupts the discussion and says that the war is failing and that they will have to change strategy to either make peace with the Parshendi or march full force and wipe them out. Hatham expresses his disdain, and Sadeas insults Dalinar, which upsets and provokes Adolin momentarily, which is what Sadeas wants, and Dalinar mentions the Parshendi envoy who offered an olive branch right before the assassination attempt, and wonders at the coincidence and if the Parshendi are still controlling Zeth as they claimed when Gavilar was killed. Dalinar outlines his plans to scout the plains and outfit a major expedition to the center of the plains and choose to train new shardbearers to use the armor and weapons that he thinks Adolin will win through duels, then brings the meeting to a close. Sabariel leaves, and Shallan says she will meet him as she goes to speak with Elhokar personally about his sister, Yasna, who is dead. Did you get that, Slava? She's dead.
I don't buy it.
She then brings a writ of pardon for Vatha and crew, and he signs them. So, a lot covered. This is another place where Sanderson uses action as well as exposition and the ignorance of a character, i.e. Shallan, coming into the mix to unravel the story that's being told in an organic way, right?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot going on here, but you also get, and I suppose this is just the consequence of what you just mentioned, you get to see Shallan adapting to a new element, a new situation, which I always like. And I've said this before, just the way Shallan adapts, and despite her fears and internal struggles, she goes for it. And even her noticing Adolin and flirting with him, that was fun. And then what sets up the next section, the meeting with Sabariel and how she weasels herself into his house, I thought we'll save that for the next chapter, but I thought that was pretty great.
Indeed. She's taken some bold steps here from being a, timid farm girl, if you will.
Yeah, nothing timid about her. I mean, everybody struggles in their head. We have battles that we fight. But Shallan's a clear example that you could have struggles and doubts and fears and still act when needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that Sadeas is going to win in his cajoling of Adolin?
In no way.
Whatever that means. Okay, great.
Oh, I can say yes, because he's gonna get stabbed in the face by Adolin later on. So yes, he's gonna get Adolin to stab him in the face. Does he win? In no way.
Ah, that's what you meant. Got it. And what about Dalinar? We haven't really had Dalinar's point of view in a minute. We've been seeing him in different chapters and different things going on, but like, how do you think he's taking it all in?
Pretty well. But watching him in these situations and knowing what has happened in the previous book and in this book so far, there's so much on this man's plate. And him navigating Navani, navigating the High Princess, navigating Amaram, and then the bullcrap that Kaladin pulls in the few sections here, or few chapters. And then Sadeas, his former friend, playing his own games against Dalinar, and his own games meaning Sadeas' games. There's a lot for this man to juggle and maneuver around all of this and still try to unite the kingdoms for this greater purpose. So, goodness, he's taking it in all right. Right now we don't see, like you said, we don't see his POV, but there has to be, I don't know. I don't want to say fear, but there has to be doubt in Dalinar that this can be accomplished.
Yeah.
He has faith, right? But I'm sure he struggles with doubt in this situation, meaning the whole thing, not just the minor ones, not the parts of the situation that I just mentioned, but this whole thing, this task in front of him given to him by the Stormfather. I'm sure he has doubts.
Right. Yeah, I think that's fair. Chapter 39, Heterochromatic. Shallan's father's having a feast. We're stepping back into the past here, right?
4 years ago, specifically.
Yes. She's trying to pretend that her family hasn't grown in blah, blah, blah.
Her father is trying to pretend.
Her father is trying to thank you. Yeah. You know what? Why don't you just step into this one, because I'm clearly flubbing all the flubberies.
All right. Chapter 39, Heterochromatic. 4 years ago, Shallan's father is having a feast, trying to pretend that their family hasn't grown impoverished. The guests that he has over are Bright Lord Tavinar and his wife and daughter. They don't seem like they want to be there. Who could blame them? And the conversation is terse and stunted. Eventually, Shallan's father calls for a toast and announces that he has found himself a new wife, Malise Gevelamar, who will be coming to the estate soon. The response is subdued, which makes him angry. Wonder why nobody wants to be around him. But he gives celebratory gifts to his children anyway. The sons receive fine daggers, and Shallan gets a silver necklace. Suddenly, the door to the feast hall slams open, and a man walks in. The man's name is Renarin, the bastard son of the High Prince Valam, and he has come to investigate rumors about Shallan's mother's death. Lyn says that his wife was murdered by her lover, but Renarin reminds him that others tell a different story. They speak alone for a while, and Lyn eventually slams his hand down on the table in anger. Calmly, Renarin stands up and announces that any Light Eyes of high birth can provide witness, and asks if any of the children will come with him to do so. Balad grabs the sides of his chair as if to stand, but seeing Lyn's face, stops and whispers that his father will kill him. Shame-spren stir among the children, and then Renarin states if any of them remember something and they want to tell him anything, they will find willing ears. After Renarin leaves, Shallan's father shrinks down in his seat with his head in his hands because he is a douchebag.
Living on Roshar would be tough because your emotions would betray you
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah, I just have curmudgeon spren around me all the time.
It's very strange. It's very strange. Like,
Yeah.
you couldn't hide anything.
No, and I haven't thought about it until you said it. I just took it at face value. I didn't think deeply through it. But yeah, oftentimes you would betray your emotions to people.
And they to you.
And they to you.
However, there's like an attraction, a magnetism with emotion for Spren. Like this, non-cognitive Spren. So, because they don't show up in every moment of every person's life, right? It has to be overwhelming of some kind.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So anyway, I'm just getting into the nuance of it, as I like to do. Did we talk about, do you think her father killed his wife?
We didn't, but he didn't.
He didn't. How do we know that?
How do we know that? Because Sanderson tells us Shallan murked her mom.
Oh, I don't remember us talking about that. Did I reveal that already?
It's in the book.
Oh, all right.
Dude. Yeah, it's in the. I read it in this book. That's. I even texted you like, holy crap.
I believe you. Here's the thing. When you've read all 20 whatever books, it's a lot to keep in your little brain.
Well, do you love books, audience? Do you love this podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so you never miss an episode.
All right, then we'll just keep moving on. Chapter 40. Pelona. Sebarial and Shallan return to the war camp after his meeting. Sebarial explains that he profits from manufacturing and farming and selling his goods to other high princes, greatly offsetting his fines for not participating in the hunts. They arrive at Sebarial's manor, and Shallan is introduced to Pelona, Sebarial's quote-unquote mistress. Pelona helps Shallan settle into her living quarters. This is a shorter chapter, but we do see a little behind the curtains of Sebarial, the games that he's playing, which are not the same games that the other high princes are playing, because he saw a gap in the market, if you will, where the high princes are all going to war, they're all, battle hungry, and he's like, I just want to be a merchant, and so I'm not going to go to war, and I'll pay the silly prices because I'm just making hand over fist selling things to the high princes. And Shallan catches wind of it, and she's like, oh, well, then I'll do your books, except I'll do them for a very, very high price. And he's kind of like a, he's honestly kind of like Zyle, a little curmudgeon-y, but I think he's more soft-hearted because he's got Pelona, and they have what I would probably call a marriage that you might see in, I don't know, another like Eastern European marriage where you're grumpy with your spouse, but you actually love them, and that's how you show it because that's just what you do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can relate.
I'm actually just talking about you.
And obviously. And I just want to correct one thing that I said earlier. I said that is going to happen further on in the book, but it's actually right before this chapter that Shallan immerses herself into Sebarial's camp, which was done really well, I thought, on Shallan's part. And her coming into this family, I think, will give her some stability because Sebarial, soft-hearted, at the end of the day, agrees to all her shenanigans, agrees to feed her and clothe her and give her a home. And Pelona shows some big sister or aunt-like love towards Shallan, which would be very good. Will be very good, hopefully, for Shallan.
Oh, yeah. But short and sweet chapter, and we keep moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Take it away with 41.
41, Scars. Kaladin gives orders for Teth to train Bridge 17 in the chasms. There are 37 days remaining before the mysterious glyph countdown reaches 0. Syl asks Kaladin what his goal is now that his bridgemen are relatively safe. Kaladin says he wants to beat Szeth. But Syl scoffs at Kaladin's explanation that he's trying to protect Dalinar. Kaladin encounters Sigzil, who is speculating with Rock and Lopen about Szeth's motivation and true employer as they were trained by his master to ask questions. Kaladin tries to duplicate Szeth's feat of walking on walls and fails. Sigzil wishes that he could see Syl and she appears to him. Kaladin asks both Syl and Sigil about Windrunners, so he can be better prepared to battle Szeth, but neither is able to give him any information. Sigil, Rock, and Lopen discuss the attempt to make Elokar fall off his balcony, but Kaladin ignores them and suddenly has an insight and a vision of another world that allows him to walk on the wall of the chasm. Kaladin tells Syl that he protects Dalinar so he can know if Dalinar lives up to his reputation as being honorable, and Syl tells him that honor lives in people and spren like her. Kaladin says that if he trusts Dalinar, that he will share the knowledge of his abilities with him. Then Kaladin says he will kill Amaram for his betrayal. Kaladin falls from the chasm wall and lands in the chasm with Stormlight aided strength. Kaladin goes on to explain his theory about the Shardbearer slicing through the balcony after the high storm, and Kaladin notices gouges from where the chasm fiend passed and is concerned that it will be dangerous to train there. Kaladin and the others return to their barracks and find a tense dinner gathering. Renarin asks to join Bridge 4 to become a warrior like Dalinar and Adolin, and to be glorified in the Tranquiline halls. Renarin eventually persuades Kaladin to allow him to provisionally join Bridge 4 as a new recruit, and shows a good attitude even when given menial tasks to do. Moash expresses doubt, but Kaladin says that Renarin is different from most Light Eyes and could fit in with them. Kaladin ponders how to confront Moash over suspicion of him helping to assassinate Elokar. Moash then advises Kaladin to try to get a duel against Amaram to deliver his own justice. Moash and a few bridgemen leave to go drinking and invite Kaladin. Kaladin, being Kaladin, declines and stays to eat dinner alone.
When you were reading this, what did you think before this chapter of like who tried to kill the king? Who do you think who were you thinking it was?
I was thinking that the king was being a big old baby again.
Oh, fair
and
enough.
I thought maybe the king did it again. He has access to Shardblades, so I thought maybe he just wants attention.
All right.
And then when Kaladin starts having his doubts, I was like, okay, this is not the king being a baby. This is probably an inside job. So I started thinking about who it could be.
Mm-hmm.
Kaladin provided me a suspect, Moash, and it turns out that it was true. We read in later chapters that it was Moash.
Yeah. Which stings because it's, his buddy. His very few friends.
Right. And a friend who he felt comfortable confiding
Correct.
in.
Which is why it hurts.
Which is
Yeah.
worse.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Man, tough times. What do you think about Renarin during Bridge 4?
I thought it was great. I thought it was in character. And I knew that he was going to be a good recruit. The way we've seen Renarin be built as a character, written as a character so far by Sanderson, I knew he was going to do the stuff that he did. And I'm glad that Kaladin let him in. He's just showing the guys that not all Light Eyes are crazy or, pompous a-holes. And it gives him, because I really like Renarin, it gives him a chance to really show himself and be motivated and work in a disciplined manner in a specific space that forces him to grow into the man that he wants to grow in.
Yeah. That leads me to another question. Renarin, in general, how do I even phrase the question? What is his role in all of this, do you think?
I don't think he has a role yet. Maybe not even an Oathbringer. I'm guessing because Sanderson has him starting off as a recruit here. And yes, later on in the book, his eyes heal because, if I remember correctly, he's also a Radiant.
Yeah. Eventually.
Right. Yeah. No role now, obviously. Whatever the Radiants are doing in the Cosmere on this planet, which I don't know much because purposefully avoiding certain information and then you not giving me the information for other reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I have limited myself in certain knowledge. So if I'm guessing at this juncture, obviously he plays the role that he's meant to play as a Radiant, But currently, he's just being trained to grow into that person more fully. But I couldn't answer any other way. I couldn't give you a direct
totally.
answer.
I mean,
Who knows?
he's new to Bridge 4. He doesn't feel like he fits in anywhere. The cool thing about Renarin is he understands that he's like a chump's not the right word. What's the right word? What is the word that I'm looking for?
An outsider?
Yeah, he's ill-prepared. He's weak. He needs to change that. He sees that in Bridge 4 you can change that. So he's like, well, I wanna be a part of it. And, I'm sure Kaladin's super uncomfortable. Like, we're supposed to protect you. You're the son of the guy that I'm serving under. And I think, as we see, Kaladin just kind of comes to the conclusion, like, well, we don't have to protect him as much if we just train him to fight.
Yeah, and if he's always
Yeah.
around us,
Yeah.
then
It almost makes my job easier. So, just like this is one of those fun turns where you're like, oh, yeah, this is cool. All right, cool. Renarin's a bit of a dweeb, but
Yeah.
sure, fine. All right.
yeah, but a dweeb that wants to change. So he sees his limitations, understands his limitations, doesn't like that he has his limitations, doesn't live inside his own head like Kaladin does, or at least not as long as Kaladin
Well, just
does,
differently.
and
but yeah.
takes steps to rectify.
Yeah. Ugh. I'm just want to relish in the moment for a second. It's nice to have more people to chit chat about the Cosmere with, and anyone who reads the Cosmere understands what I'm talking about, where it's like the more, I think I mentioned this to Slava before we started recording, but like the more that he reads the Cosmere, it unlocks things that I can talk about, and Spencer can talk about, because Slava's been berating us with like, Mistborn's dumb, blah, 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 and we're like, we promise, like, if the book was dumb and like pointless, we would tell you this sucks, but you got to read it if you want to know like these things. You don't have to read it, we'll just tell you the things, right? But because there's so much more involved than that, we will, we encourage Slava to read it. So, but it's nice to be able to have those unlocks because Slava's continuing to read. He's enraptured with part of the Cosmere at the moment, but I think that will change as he finishes Arrow 1.
I'm still reading it despite my complaints.
That's right. All right. Mere Vapors, Chapter 42. And we're winding down here, so thanks for joining us for this ride, folks. But Chapter 42 is Mere Vapors. Shallan wakes up in her new quarters in the evening, and Shallan and Pattern converse, and Shallan teaches her Spren, Pattern, figures of speech. And this is one of those fun moments during the book where, again, we're getting an understanding of, like, what are Spren? How do they function? What do they mature like? How do they learn things? Why are they here? Things like that. And Pattern is funny and also just kind of like an intellectual. So, he's here to like study humans, right? And during this time, Shallan reads one of Tin's old correspondence regarding Yasna, Hastavar, and the Ghostbloods. And Pattern points out a cipher, a code that is detected in the messages, and Shallan frets that she will not be able to infiltrate the Ghostbloods. But using her sketching and her light weaving abilities that she's still learning, and this is, again, another fun part, like, superheroes don't just automatically know how to do all their things. They also have to learn how to walk and then run and then jog and then do whatever with their bodies. Or powers, if you will.
Shoot web.
What?
Shoot
yes,
web.
Shoot web. Thank you, Spider-Man. Shallan receives a message from the Spanreed that indicates the Ghostbloods want to meet with Tin that evening. But Shallan says that she's not well and she will send her apprentice, intermediary. And the Ghostbloods respond, and they will meet with the apprentice. They give her a map, and Shallan wears Tin's clothes, Bluth's hat, and dark eyes as a disguise as she leaves to go to the rendezvous.
I had faith. When I was reading this, I knew she was going to do it. You haven't read the whole book. Obviously, we know what happens.
Right.
And she does. She does survive. But when this chapter came up, I was like, oh, cool. Shallan's going to go do a thing. I was kind of worried about her doing the thing because that might affect her betrothal to Adolin, and she's going to have to play this game with the Colin family. And so I was worried about her being exposed.
100%.
More than I was worried about her being killed or somehow failing at infiltrating the Ghostbloods.
Talk to me more about this double life she has to lead because she's trying to do a thing.
Well, she's starting to have a mental breakdown at some point. The double life includes her being a high lady. So the double life specifically is
She's a bright eyes.
she needs to pretend she's Tin's apprentice and then somebody who's killed Tin and taken over Tin's business. And it also has to be brightness Shallan. She has to be royalty and bring about the betrothal to Adolin to a conclusion. So she should act a certain way. She has to find out more about the Voidbringers, continue Yasna's research in her absence, and then balance it with this other life that she has with the Ghostbloods. And she's kind of working with the Ghostbloods against some of the Bright Lords. So there's this treachery within treachery. So for her, there's deception on one end, but that deception can undo everything. Not just, oh, she'll lose Adolin. Oh, she won't have enough time. This is so trivial, but she won't have enough time to work on Yasna's research. Her world will come apart if she fails at either task. And if the lives meet, if her double lives meet, that's it. Game over.
True. Yeah, and the High Princes don't even really know that the Ghostbloods exist yet, right? Like, not that we're aware of.
Yeah, exactly. They might be aware of factions out there.
Yeah.
But they don't know their names, I don't think, or they don't know that these guys specifically that are working against them.
Yeah. It's fun being a reader when you get to see these things happening, but they're still, the characters don't know it. And so you're like, oh man, what's going to happen?
Yeah, for sure. But moving on to our last chapter for this episode, Chapter 43, The Ghostbloods. Shallan goes to her rendezvous, walks to the meeting using her map as a guide. Shallan tells Pattern to follow her and try to see if anyone tries to tail her, and Pattern reports that nobody is following her. She reaches the destination, which is a tenement building, and is admitted by a horn-eater guard. The guard points her to a staircase leading down, and she finds another room with a trapdoor and takes a ladder down further and ends up in a carpeted trophy room with several people. One of the people reminds her of Hoyd. The man points a blowgun dart past her and shoots a dart at a target behind her. The man questions Tin's story, and Shallan revises it, saying that Tin wants to work through an intermediary for now. The man praises Shallan's boldness and tries to bribe Shallan into revealing where Tin is hiding, but Shallan declines and calls his bluff of torturing her successfully. The man says he revised his plan to kill Shallan and track down Tin, and that he is satisfied at Tin's partial success, but unhappy that Tin didn't show up in person. 5 other people, including a masked woman, are present. Shallan takes a moment to examine the shelves and mementos. The man who identifies himself as Mraize says his next target is Amaram. Mraize says that Tin is to learn Amaram's secrets from his manor and bring information the following week. Shallan, a.k.a. Vale, accepts the assignment and doesn't haggle over the payment and is dismissed. After Shallan leaves the building, Pattern warns her that the masked woman is tailing her. She draws a sketch and creates an illusionary wall to hide from her pursuer. Shallan's disguise quickly vanishes as her Stormlight runs out and she ditches her coat and hat and returns to the manor. She's feeling excited over the adventure and makes plans to investigate Amaram.
And I really hope they get Amaram. Just get him. Just deal with him so that Kaladin, although wouldn't be satisfying for his revenge, at least he'd be dealt with. So hopefully they do that.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about these mementos.
Oh, yeah.
That Shallan is examining. You said something interesting before we started recording.
So the mementos are, you think, okay, Sanderson's just describing the room, and we question what they are. Shallan's curious about what they are. But what we find out later is that all the mementos that are described, not all of them to this point, but Sanderson gets into the place where he starts to share with us where they're from. in different books in the Cosmere to give us, I guess, payoff and connect the dots a little bit. So Mraize has these things in jars and bottles and just on shelves, little mementos from, I'll just tell you, different places around the Cosmere, which incites questions of like, how did he get them?
Is he a world hopper?
He could be. Can you give us a the reading of that section real quick?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Okay, here it is. Here goes. She hopped off the carpet and turned, finding a room that was incongruously palatial. A long dining table ran down the center and it sparkled with glass goblets that had gemstones set on their sides. Their glow sprayed the room with light. Cozy shelves lined the walls, each laden with books and ornaments. Many were in small glass cases. Trophies of some sort? Of the half-dozen or so people in the room, one drew her attention the most. Straight-backed, with jet-black hair, he wore white clothing and stood in front of the room's crackling hearth, and reminded her of someone, a man from her childhood. The messenger with the smiling eyes, the enigma who knew so much.
Oh, maybe it's not this this section then. There's another section where she meets with Mraize, and he's got a bunch of little trinkets around, and it talks about like crystal vials or crystals in a vial that are pink, and a feather, and some other stuff. I must be getting this confused with a later moment.
Yeah, I don't think it's in this chapter then.
Fair enough. Well, anyway, when we get there, the thought is that maybe Mraize is a world hopper because these little things have payoffs in other books. That's the gist of it. That had less of a payoff than I thought it would because I thought this was that chapter, but I am getting ahead of myself.
Well, we can end on another hard day's work and a job well done by Shallan. And she gets in, survives the tests, if you will, as such they were, and gets out. And now she has a job to target Amaram specifically.
Yes.
A little tense moments here and there.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking ahead here. I think it's chapter 64 called Treasures. Maybe not. It's later. Whatever. We'll get to it. It's fine. Anywho, that anticlimactic moment leads us to the end of this episode. So thanks for joining us. Drop your comments below of how Words Radiance has been for you. Thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, assumptions. Yeah, we want to hear from you.
Yeah, where is Yasna? Why is it taking her so long to return?
Biddy. That's all, folks.
Yeah. Well, make sure to share this episode with fellow book adventurers. It helps more listeners discover SideQuest. And join us next time for more Cosmere adventures. Until then, happy questing.